In 2001, Nokia built a tablet, a touchscreen device with a web browser, wireless internet, and 800 by 600 display. They built 1,000 working units, 6 years before the iPhone. Then, Nokia's market research said there was no demand, so they destroyed the units. The engineers each kept one, and the team that built the future was fired. 6 years later, Steve Jobs walked on stage with the exact device Nokia had already built and buried. Within 5 years, Nokia's phone business was worth almost nothing. Here's what every version of this story gets wrong. Nokia did not miss the smartphone. Nokia invented pieces of it first: the touchscreen, the tablet, even the App Store concept. Their labs were years ahead. They saw it coming. They built it. They killed it on purpose. The reason isn't technology. It's a feeling, one that moved through the entire company like a current. This is case number 2. To understand the fall, you have to understand how total the dominance was. In 2007, Nokia sold 437 million phones in a single year. Its global market share hit roughly 40%, more than double its nearest rival. In smartphones specifically, its share was around 50%. 1 in every 2 smartphones on Earth was a Nokia. Revenue that year was over 50 billion euros. Net profit, 7.2 billion. At its peak, the company had topped $150 billion in value, the most valuable company in Europe. The Nokia 1100 became the best-selling phone in human history, 250 million units, the best-selling consumer electronics product of any kind for years. Nokia wasn't a market leader. Like Kodak before it, Nokia was the market. And also like Kodak, the seeds of collapse were already planted at the very peak. Because in January of that same record-breaking year, a man in a black turtleneck stood on a stage in San Francisco and held up a phone with no keyboard. Nokia's internal reaction to the iPhone was not panic. It was dismissal. A touchscreen with no physical keyboard. A battery that barely lasted a day. None of the business features corporate customers depended on. To Nokia's engineers, it looked like a fragile toy. Their phones survived drops onto concrete. This thing shattered if you looked at it wrong. And on raw specifications, they weren't entirely wrong. The first iPhone couldn't send a picture message, ran on slow 2G, and had no app store at launch. But Nokia was measuring the wrong thing. They were grading the iPhone as a phone. Apple hadn't built a phone. They'd built a pocket computer that happened to make calls, and a platform 1 million developers could build on. Here's the part that turns this from a story into a lesson. Nokia knew this. Not vaguely, specifically. Their engineers had warned for years that Symbian, Nokia's operating system, could not compete with what was coming. Their labs had touchscreen prototypes, tablet designs, even a proposal for an online application store in 2004, 4 years before Apple's App Store. Every one of those ideas was raised, and every one was killed. The question that defines this entire case is simple. Why does a company kill the exact ideas that would save it when it can see the danger with its own eyes? I want to step away from the products because the real failure isn't in any device. It's in the wiring of the organization itself, And this one is personal to how every company you've ever worked for actually behaves. In 2015, two researchers, Timo Vuori and Kui Hui, interviewed 76 people inside Nokia, top managers, middle managers, engineers. They weren't asking, what did Nokia get wrong? They were asking what Nokia's own people felt while it happened. What they found has a name: organizational fear. Here's how it worked as a system. At the top sat a group of temperamental, intimidating executives under enormous pressure to hit quarterly targets. Miss your numbers, as one put it, and you become a former executive very quickly. That fear flowed downward. Top managers made middle managers afraid of them. Middle managers made engineers afraid of them. And at every layer, the same thing happened to the truth. An engineer knew Symbian was falling behind, but telling that truth upward meant being the person who delivered bad news to a leader who punished bad news. So the engineer softened it. The middle manager softened it again. By the time reality reached the top, it had been sanded down into something survivable. The software was closer than it was. Symbian more competitive than it was. The timeline fine when it wasn't.
Watch the mechanism, because this is the whole episode. The information existed. Every fact needed to save Nokia was known by someone inside the building. It simply could not travel upward, because at every level, honesty was more dangerous to the individual than silence. This is a death spiral, exactly like Kodak's. But where Kodak's was made of concrete and chemistry, Nokia's was made of fear. A factory can't shrink below its minimum scale. A frightened organization can't tell itself the truth. Both are structural. Both are fatal. And neither can be fixed by a smarter person in the corner office, because the corner office is where the fear starts. Once you see the fear, the collapse reads like clockwork. In 2010, Nokia launched what the press called its iPhone killer. It wasn't. The software kept arriving late and broken, because the teams building it were competing internal fiefdoms. Symbian against Migo against everything else, each protecting its own budget, none allowed to say the whole approach was failing. In 2011, a new CEO wrote an infamous memo describing Nokia as a man standing on a burning platform, forced to jump into icy water. An honest diagnosis, finally. But the fear had cost years, and years were the one thing Nokia no longer had. Watch the number. Second quarter, 2007. Nokia held nearly 51% of the smartphone market. 6 years later, second quarter, 2013, 3.1%. By 2017, 1%. In September 2013, Nokia sold its entire phone business to Microsoft for around 5.4 billion euros. At its peak, the company had been worth over $250 billion. Roughly 98% of that value gone. The best-selling phone company in the history of the world. Undone in 6 years. Not by a better product they couldn't build, but by a truth they couldn't say out loud. So here's what's actually in this file. Nokia's failure was not a failure of vision. They saw the touchscreen future so clearly, they built it in a lab in 2001. Kodak defined itself by its output and couldn't escape its factory. Nokia saw the escape route perfectly and couldn't walk through it because the organization was physically incapable of speaking the truth to the people with the power to act. That's the pairing at the heart of these two cases. Kodak proves that seeing the future isn't enough if your assets trap you. Nokia proves something worse, that seeing the future isn't enough if your people are too afraid to say it. The useful question isn't, did they see it coming? At Nokia, everyone saw it coming. The useful question is darker. In your company, the one you actually work in, what's the last piece of bad news that reached the top unsoftened? If you can't remember one, you already know which failure mode you're living in. Fear doesn't announce itself. It just quietly edits the truth on its way up the ladder, until one day, the people in charge are steering a company that no longer exists. Case number 2 is closed. Case number 3, a retailer that turned down the chance to become Amazon twice and printed its own obituary in a boardroom. It's on the channel Friday.